Good morning, afternoon, whatever this is. Great to be here. Glad to see all of you can make it. How many of you remember those days when you drive down the road, small highway, you'd see all these billboards along the side, all kinds of garbage in the ditches and on the parking? How many remember that? How many are old enough to remember that? We've got some old timers in here. I see all the old timers raising their hands. Burma shave. That's it. Burma shave. Why don't we see that anymore? Why don't we see it like we used to? Sure, maybe some corner of the universe still has that, but why don't we see that around this country like we used to? What happened? Cultural shift. How did that happen? New awareness, new enlightenment. Lady Bird Johnson, keep America beautiful.
Don't mess with Texas.
Don't mess with Texas. The whole idea of what was right and wrong changed. And it didn't take that long for that to happen. Just big momentum, sort of like the Berlin Wall, all of a sudden, overnight, big change happens. Right now, after 3.5 decades in this business, right now I'm beginning to see that we're in the midst of another fundamental change. Another fundamental change in expectations about organizations and their social and environmental responsibility, expectations about what is right and wrong. No longer are we seeing rivers polluted to the point where they're catching fire. No longer are people commonly dumping drums of toxic waste and oil out on the back 40. So things are changing, and it's a good change. And with this change comes a whole new vocabulary. 10 years ago, were we talking about climate change? Were we talking about carbon footprint? Were we talking about post-consumer waste? Were we talking about fair trade? Well, not too many people were talking about it, but it is working its way into the common parlance. And one of the new terms is, of course, this one. Sustainability. Certainly we're hearing about it in the news. We've heard, how many of you heard of Walmart and its Sustainability 360 program and General Electric and its Eco-Imagination program with all of its energy-conserving devices? Certainly we've heard that. What about the Nobel Peace Prize last 3 years? Should have been renamed the Sustainability Prize. 3 years ago was Wangari Maathai, a Kenyan woman who convinced women in her country to plant 30 million trees, and at the same time she was promoting human rights. Year after that, anybody remember who got it? Muhammad Yunus, professor from Bangladesh. He had this revolutionary idea. He said, the reason people are poor is because they have no money. The reason people are poor is because they have no money. If we want to change all of that, what we have to do is find a way of getting money in the hands of these poor people, and we can do that by creating special banking institutions for them. We call them microcredit financial institutions, and we'll loan money in small quantities to these people, and we'll help them pull themselves up by the bootstraps and take themselves to another level of economic success. People said, that's kind of crazy, isn't it? Particularly since you're not going to be using any lawyers for this. You're going to rely on encouragement and peer pressure to get people to pay the money back. How's that going to work? It just won't work, Mohammed. You're nuts. But you know what? It turned out to be successful, and now they've got significantly sized microcredit financial institutions in 58 different countries. That's why he got the award. And of course, last year, anybody remember? Yeah. We've got Al Gore and the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. And of course, remember, you can't forget Tony Blair and all his proselytizing about climate change. And now we've got water shortages to deal with. I was just down in Tucson a few months ago, and I discovered that they had appointed a sustainability director for their city, primarily because they were grappling with the difficult issue of whether they were going to have to stop development altogether because they don't have enough water. Socially responsible investing, now 1 out of every $10 of professionally managed investment in the U.S. is screened for some sort of environmental, social condition. And you can't forget these folks. They've made a big splash around sustainability. And if you go to the business pages, you not only see it in the general news, but you see these kinds of deals. You've got Bert and the Body Shop and those folks who are producing these sort of natural products, these organic products, these beauty, health aid products. It used to be kind of a niche thing, but no longer. It's selling for $1 billion. You've got Whole Foods selling $6.6 billion of organic foods, taking advantage of that popularity. And of course, our friends Toyota, so I happen to be one of the million, now selling its millionth Prius. All signs of the so-called sustainability, all evidence of what's happening here. But why are these companies doing this? Why are all these organizations turning green? I actually did a survey, worked with the conference board doing some survey of some key industries that had gone green. And I said, oh, have you been increasing resources in this area? He said, yes. So I said, why? What is causing you to do that? And here's what they said. Reputation, brand, and particularly pressure from our customers. We're trying to keep our image up. This is part of the expectations for corporations these days, and our customers are starting to talk about it, and they're asking us a lot of questions, and we need to be able to respond. They also said, you know what? If we reduce our pollution, like Dow and DuPont have done, saving $1 billion over a number of years, my own company, Baxter, they spent $800 million less than they would have over a course of a dozen years because of pollution prevention, improving their, reducing waste, improving their safety, becoming more productive. You know, there's benefit in doing some of this. Employee morale, particularly the new young employees coming out of the universities who have high expectations about the ethics and moral positions that companies take on social and environmental issues. And of course, peer pressure. You know, maybe we don't even want to do this, but gosh darn it, those competitors down the block all seem to be getting all the publicity, and they seem to be becoming more efficient and more productive. You know, maybe we need to do that too if we're going to keep up with the Joneses. So these are the drivers. And what it really boils down to are these key things. In the long term, we're going to be more financially viable because we'll be able to perhaps attract more customers. We'll be able to be more productive. And of course, loyalty of key stakeholders. And by that, I mean these folks. Now, why is that important? What happens if you don't have the support and loyalty of your stakeholders? What kind of an organization do you have? Yeah, you have no organization. There is no organization unless you have the support of these folks. And so the organizations that are truly successful are those that somehow figure out how to keep these people loyal and supportive and working together, good teamwork, all for common purposes. How do you do that? Well, there's a number of ways, but two of the key ways, of course, is making sure that you're credible, that you're truthful, you're believable. If you're not believable with your own stakeholders, what good is that? They just don't trust you. Trust is the big word here. And of course, economic, environmental, and social performance. You've got to have good performance in these areas with regard to your products and services, whether you're a university providing education or whether you're some sort of product providing medical or company providing medical products. You've got to make sure your products are financially right, priced right, that they're environmentally and socially responsible. And that's true about your operations as well. So these are things that help influence the stakeholder loyalty. So how do you make these things happen? Well, first of all, to be credible, you have to be transparent. That's a tough thing for organizations to do. They don't like to be transparent. They're not naturally transparent. Who wants to share their dirty laundry? What person wants to talk about their faults? It comes naturally to resist that kind of thing. But in the end, it's perhaps the most healthy thing you can do because it allows you to, first of all, face what your challenges are, and then second of all, try to deal with them in a way that's well understood by your stakeholders and perhaps supported by your stakeholders. And the fact is they end up trusting you more because now you're having dialogue with them, which is, of course, the next piece. If you really want to understand how to do this, if you want to be most credible, you start engaging in discussions with your stakeholders. In the case of the university, it would be student groups, faculty groups, administration groups, operations groups, funders, communities, those key stakeholders that you have. Stakeholder engagement is critical not only to create this credibility, but also to create an understanding of what the expectations are around your environmental, social, and economic performance. If you talk to the stakeholders and you ask them what is your expectation here, now you're going to be better able to address that, aren't you? Rather than just sitting back in some hole over here and trying to guess what they are thinking and guess what they're expecting. The key is dialogue. Again, Sometimes some organizations aren't particularly good at that. They're too busy to talk to other folks. And unfortunately, that's where they get a lot of their good feedback and where they can really help shape their success. So these are critical things if you're going to create that. Fundamental truth here, certainly when you look at large corporations, is this. They're beginning to see this whole thing as of strategic importance. It's not just, kind of a green paint you're putting on here, some greenwash we're slapping on top of this structure. They're looking at it as, well, wait a minute, this goes to the heart of our organization. And how do we know that that's happening? Well, there's a good example here, of course, Walmart. They've got a guy who's now the vice president of strategy and sustainability. The points being combined. Why would they do that if it wasn't connected? Why did they have this guy there in the first place? What was this great enlightenment? Well, you can speculate about that. I have to tell you, I think there's certainly one thing that contributed to them coming to the realization that perhaps they needed to do something. They hired this consulting firm, McKinsey, well-known firm, to go out and do a survey. They said, okay, how many customers that perhaps are being affected by our reputational problems around the environment and labor and social issues? McKinsey came back, well, we've pulled a lot of their customers, and you know what? You've probably lost about 8% of your customers because of your environmental and social reputation. Well, if the people in Bentonville were trying to kind of hunker down and think of themselves as a victim, all of a sudden that kind of data was a shocking thing because they're in business to be in business. Their job is to try to sell things, and if now their reputation is affecting that, they know it's real, it's strategic, it's important. And in fact, as they started getting into this vice president of strategy and sustainability, they started doing some things. They started saying, wait, one of our opportunities is in packaging. Hey, so maybe we can engage our stakeholders, bring our suppliers in to talk about this and what we can do. And you know what? Maybe we can create a value network going beyond this initial summit and ask 200 different leaders from government, academia, NGOs, and industry. Maybe we can really engage our stakeholders to try to help us figure this out. And you know what? Maybe when we do this, we can save ourselves $3.5 billion. And by the way, $11 billion for the supply chain. So now they're saying we can be green, and you know what? We can be a lot more productive. So this is not, just a little greenwash. This is real business for them. This is why they have strategy and sustainability mixed together. So it all begs this great question: what is sustainability? Oh, it's this great warm and fuzzy thing. I think I know what it is. All of you say, but if I went around and asked every single one of you, each would give me some different view. So let's take a minute to talk about that. First, of course, I kind of look at this at different layers. You have to kind of bore down on it, and you start from the top. What's the gut understanding of this concept? How do you really, intuitively grasp it? I go back to the early 90s. I was dealing with the NAFTA, North American Free Trade Agreement. Anybody familiar with that? Right. Yeah. Very controversial, highly controversial. Highly controversial at the time it was being debated. And at the time it was being debated, there was a lot going on. Companies just saying this is what we really need. And in response to that, you had these communities along the border in Mexico who had religious groups and social groups and small groups and big groups asking some questions of industry. And I was involved in those discussions. And these groups, Sister Mary's, charitable organization, whatever the names were asking these questions. They'd say, well, if this treaty goes through and you end up moving more of your operations and factories down to our communities, tell me, what kind of wages are you going to pay? We've got some environmental challenges. Our streams are kind of polluted. Are you going to help clean that up? Are you going to be environmentally responsible? We're concerned about safety. We've got a lot of unsafe factories in our community. How safe is your operation going to be? Our wastewater systems and our water system are just terrible. Can you help us improve the infrastructure for those? Or are you going to make it worse? Are you going to draw on our wells so we don't have any water? Or are you going to somehow be sensitive to our needs there? What is it that you're going to do to contribute to the well-being of our community? How is it that you're going to do these things? Are you going to be a good corporate citizen or not? In effect, what they were asking is, are you the kind of organization that's pursuing sustainability, or are you not? These questions that they were asking go to the heart of what sustainability is about. And so sometimes I wonder, is this a sustainability issue or not? I think back to those folks, and is this the kind of question they'd be asking? If it is, it's probably in the area of sustainability. So that's sort of my intuitive level of understanding of this. But then there's always the book learning definitions, and you've probably seen a number of them. UN Brundtland Commission back in '87, they had this debate between the rich countries and the poor countries, and they said the rich countries are saying, oh, you poor countries got to get your act together around the environment. The poor countries just said, easy for you to say. You went through this period of economic development. Now you're rich enough to afford all these great things. Out of this debate came the understanding you need both economic development, environmental responsibility, as well as social. And they came up with this definition, development that meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. Basically what they said is the idea is to live off the interest, maintain the resources, economic, natural resources for future generations so they can have as good a life, as we do. And maybe in some parts of the world, better life. Then, of course, 10 years later, you have my friend John Elkington out of the UK coming back and saying, wait a minute, if we look at this from an organizational perspective, we really need to look at it this way. Typically, companies are supposed to meet this financial bottom line. They have to hit this profit target that they're after. That's what they've traditionally been focused on. But really, in today's world, there's more than one bottom line. It's not just financial. You've got a social and environmental bottom line as well, the triple bottom line, his concept. You look at the Dow Jones Sustainability Index, and now we see a lot of these indexes out there. They kind of scrutinize companies for their sustainability performance, and they put them in little indexes like the S&P 500 and the Dow Jones Industrial Index, but now they've got those in sustainability. This group, Dow Jones Sustainability Index, says, again, focus on the triple bottom line with an emphasis on shareholder value. Look, we need to look at the triple bottom line, but we need to do that with a perspective on shareholder value. I've looked at probably 24 of these things, these different definitions, and try to boil it down. What is it really, the essence of this? And it seems to be what I call the 2 R's. Respect for people and other living things. The wise use of economic and natural resources. And for what purpose? For the purpose of promoting, the long-term well-being, of both of the organization and of society. So, that's it. That's it in a nutshell. So you say, okay, Bill, this is great, but how is this different from all these other terms? I see all these other terms out there. Does this mean the same thing, or do these terms mean something else? Well, when you look at the context, and you have to look at the context, often people, when they write about these terms, they mean the same thing that we've just talked about in terms of sustainability. But when you dig a little deeper, what you find is that each of these terms has a slightly different connotation. So, for example, sustainable development in Europe, they look at that as sort of the societal level. You're looking at this from a global or national level of economic, social, environmental performance. Whereas at the organizational level, they like to call that sustainability. That's one way they look at it. Sustainable growth. This is a very popular term with DuPont. When they use it, they mean the same thing as sustainability. But other people say, well, wait a minute. What that really means is unbridled growth, irrespective of environmental or social aspects at all. And therefore, this is exactly what we want. These last three, often again used to mean the same thing as sustainability, but they all spring from when you look at the history, they spring from this notion of philanthropy. And what's typically missing, and often missing from these, as some of them use it, is this whole notion of the economic viability of the organization, the financial profitability of the organization, the ability of the organization to survive economically. Some people say, well, that's separate. That's the business side of things, and here's we're doing the social, environmental side of things. So that's how it differs from sustainability, where sustainability encompasses the whole thing. And that's why I prefer sustainability, because it is a critical part of the organization. You want sustainability to be part of the lifeblood of the organization. Part of the lifeblood of the organization is being financially viable, economically successful. So then you go down and you say, okay, Bill, this sounds good. All this book learning definition, this intuitive definition, but I'm an organization. I got to roll up my sleeves and do stuff. What is it that you want me to do with this? What does this mean in terms of expectations? And what we've discovered, and what I've discovered, and having examined what it is that companies were reporting about sustainability, what is it they were being asked to communicate about sustainability by their stakeholders, I've discovered that these were the implied expectations behind it. So, for example, if they're asking you about hazardous waste numbers, what's the implied expectation? The implied expectation is that you're going to try to reduce that hazardous waste as much as possible, and you're going to try to properly manage it. So behind every question is an implied expectation, and this is what this particular document captures. It's a model commitments, policy, if you will, to sustainability. And these are common in industry. In fact, we had another study with the Conference Board that actually confirmed that, yes, indeed, companies that are into this agree this is what this entails. But these obligations are not too different from what a university would be expected to do. And in fact, I'm working with the Bar Association, and the lawyers have their own little version of this. So we talked about this, economic prosperity. Certainly we've got to be positioned to prosper economically. We want to help our communities do the same. On the social side, we've got to talk about our employees. We want to have a non-exploitive relationships. Health and safety has to be a concern. Work-life balance, all these kinds of issues. Training, development, diversity and fair hiring practices. Making sure that we're operating in an ethical and legal way. Respect for our local populations, investors, suppliers, and the supply chain and so forth. Governments, communities. Fair dealing with our customers. And of course, the environmental list, traditional list, resource conservation, waste prevention and management, environmental risk, making sure we're properly managing our risks, working on a supply chain side of things with our suppliers and the like, and of course, working with our communities. So if you say, I want to be sustainable, what does that mean? It means this. It means you're signing up to try to pursue these kinds of obligations, try to fulfill those kinds of obligations. That's what you're signing up for. Some people say, I want to be sustainable, but I only want to do the environmental part. Sorry, don't call yourself a sustainable organization. You call yourself an environmentally sensitive organization, but don't omit that part of it. So this is what the general expectations are if you look at different kinds of stakeholders about what you should be doing if you want to call yourself sustainable. Now, you say, okay, Bill, now I kind of got the idea, but isn't this kind of a broad thing? Does that mean I have to do a lot of stuff on a lot of different topics? And I say, well, the potential is there. I mean, think about the kinds of topics that you might have to deal with if you want to do those kinds of things. Look at these economic topics. You've got internal sales and profits, external community donations and the like. When you look at the social topics, okay, everything from dealing with employee diversity to supporting your community services. Lots of things. What about the environmental ones? Waste disposal, spill prevention, biodiversity, all kinds of stuff. Well, Bill, how can I do that? You're just telling me that it's everything, isn't it? This is impossible for me to do. I mean, you're just saying I have to do everything. Well, what's the reality to all this? How do you boil all this down? Well, you kind of draw some truths from all of this. What you conclude is, first of all, sustainability is not about one thing. It's about a whole bunch of things. We just learned that. And the other thing, which is most important in all of this, is this. People say, what's the business case for sustainability? That's the wrong question to be asking. The real question is, what's the business case for a process that looks at the sustainability trends and issues and then tries to prioritize among them, looking at opportunities and threats to focus on those that are going to add the most value. So what's the business case? What's the value of a process that identifies value? That's really the question. That's kind of a no-brainer, isn't it? The value of a process to identify value and work on value, contribute value. So what are we talking about when we say threats and opportunities? Well, these are the traditional ones. Legal. We talked about, productivity, reputation. Those are funny. Those things are the very things that companies said is the reason that they're moving toward this, is because they see these as sustainability is posing these opportunities. Here's an example. Take water. And this is similar to what Coca-Cola is actually doing. Not exactly the same, but similar. They're looking at water as a strategic issue. They're building sustainability into the strategy of their company. And so, for example, a company that was involved in beverages, or like my company, IV Solution, might say, all right, we're looking at water, and we're going to say, what are the threats? Well, we got water shortages, and we got some competitors that have long-term water rights. That's a big business threat. Opportunities, hey, we can put in some conservation projects, perhaps save some money, maybe do some on-site water treatment, reuse, maybe be able to secure some long-term water rights ourselves. Strength is that we've got some conservation projects underway. We've got a great engineering staff. Weakness is that we'd have no long-term water rights, and you know what? In some of our communities, they have poor water infrastructure. So out of these strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, or threats, or in my case, it's a SWOT, whatever, instead of a SWOT. Anyhow, you create your objectives. And that's how you look at these different sustainability issues and trends in a strategic context. and then you create your objectives for how you're going to proceed. What are we talking about in terms of trends? There's lots of different ones here. Growth of global business competitions, digital divide. George has told me that you've been through a lot of these different things in the earlier presentations and discussions, so I'm not going to spend too much time on this. But the fact is that there's probably, I've identified 36, there's probably more. I summarized them in an appendix of my book. But it's important for you to understand, I think every organization wants to pursue sustainability needs to understand these trends and then kind of examine how they may play out strategically in your own organization. So we've got things like population growth, going way up. You've got this whole overconsumption where it's going to take 5 to 6 worlds worth of our current production if we wanted to, production if we wanted to have everybody living at the same level that the U.S. is living, which of course is impossible. You've got, what's happening with our oil and natural gas on the downhill slide. No matter if you drill in the Arctic or if you drill in the oceans, you're still going to be on this slide. Big dip here because, the oil embargo shows you what economics can do for you in terms of a motivator to keep you from spending all that money on petroleum. So there's a little clue here, but that's another trend. Of course, we all know about climate change. I'm sure you've heard a lot about that. And the big one, the next climate change issue, which is water. We've got here, looking at all of these folks down here with the yellow and red, under the average adequate levels of availability of water, and this is where we're going to see that in the year 2025, according to the experts. So we've got a huge issue coming on. All this bringing, this collision on course, resources, natural resources. And have you ever heard people talk about ecosystem services? This whole notion that forests provide services and water provides services. Forests provide services by taking carbon dioxide out of the air. They provide services in terms of habitat. They provide services in terms of the biological diversity that you need to identify new medicines and the like. So these resources, these natural resources and the biodiversity services are declining while we're having an increase in population. Some big challenges of what to do there. Of course, the UN trying to take on a lot of these issues with their Millennium Goals. If you look at these issues that they've addressed, and they've tried to set some goals around, making some progress on some, but these are huge issues that are particularly prevalent in like sub-Saharan Africa, but also in the developing world in some places as well. So you've got this you're dealing with, but I really wanted to focus on today is this piece about, so what are we going to do about it? What are organizations doing about this? How can we possibly address this stuff? And what is it as you as a university can do? And we look at this kind of thing. Why is it that this, what is it the university can do, and why is this going to be a long-term thing? And basically what you're seeing is, we talked about these trends, but it all shows up here in terms of what universities are responsible for doing. Energy conservation, carbon footprinting, all driven by these trends. These trends of consumption are driving recycling and dematerialization. Trends with regard to population profile are driving diversity. So this is why this stuff is not going to go away. People say, oh, it's just a fad. Well, it would be a fad if it wasn't being driven by these fundamental changes, these fundamental trends that are here for the longer term. As long as those trends are in place, we're going to see the responses and the pressure to respond. Now, it's not going to go in a straight line. It's everything like the stock market. It goes up and down, but the overall trend is continuing to be up. So that's why organizations need to continue doing things. And in terms of what they do, this kind of lays out what successful organizations do, how they approach this if they really want to make it stick. I mean, you can do things, you can put sort of spot check a couple things, do a thing here, a thing there or there. But if you want your organization to be in this for the long term, doing what's right to pursue sustainability, you need to take it seriously and address these different pieces. I call it the sustainability operating system, but it entails this. You have to drive your organization. You have to have something that moves your organization forward. Otherwise, it stays in place. Laws of momentum. What are these drivers? We've got to have some sort of champion. A leader has to be significantly influential in your organization. You need to have some approach for selling the idea. Why are we doing this? We're doing it because the stakeholders expect it of us. We're doing it because it can make good sense in terms of success of our organization economically, attracting more students, attracting better faculty, attracting better research, attracting better donors. We're doing this because ethically it's the right thing to do. Morally, it's what we should be doing. We're doing this because it's consistent with our purpose as an educational institution. So you need to have that sales pitch. I call it a sales pitch, selling your idea. Why should we do this? It needs to be well articulated and documented and backed up. And you need to use that around the organization to kind of get the thing going. That's a driver. It helps drive the organization forward. You need accountability mechanisms. If you set some goal, people are saying they're going to do stuff, you need to have ways of holding them accountable for it, ways of reporting progress. So you said you're going to hit this goal in terms of reducing energy. Well, are we on that mark or are we not? And if not, okay, what are we going to do about it? You've got to have follow-up. That's a driver. But you have to set the organization up to succeed, and to do that by creating the proper structure, by making sure that you're deploying, rolling things out properly so people know what they're supposed to do. You just don't have this policy at the top and then people guess what it is that they're trying to do. You have to have ways of explaining it, ways of integrating it into the operation so it becomes part of the lifeblood of the organization, the way they do things, not a separate kind of checklist. You have to have a vision of where you're going. Policy like the one I talked about. Vision of what this is all about, why we're trying to do it. Some sort of operating system standards. We'll talk about that in a moment. Strategic planning where you set your priorities. You can't do everything. What are we going to do now? What are we going to do later? What are we not going to do at all? Those decisions have to be made because you can't do everything. Too often companies try to do, and universities try to do too much and then they collapse from fatigue. Evaluators. Are we on the mark? Are we meeting our goals? Have we set goals? Do we have ways of measuring? Are we reporting our progress? A key thing here is reporting. And of course the all-important stakeholder engagement. Are we just kind of doing this sort of myopically? Are we kind of getting in some sort of ancestral dialogue? Or do we actually go outside to get a healthy understanding of the way people see us, the way our stakeholders see us, and what they think about us, and our performance and our expectations? Are we meeting those expectations or not? These are the critical pieces to any organization, whether it's a university, whether it's a small business, whether it's a big corporation. This is critical to how to move forward if you're really serious about sustainability. Of course, with a small organization, it's a lot simpler, but still, same basic elements. When I talk about, let me try to jump back here. Of course, you move down this path, and then, of course, what you want to do is go through cycles of continual improvement as to get closer and closer to sustainability. And by continual improvement cycles, I mean things like this. It's the old, what they used to call plan, do, check, act. You plan the thing, you kind of go out and do it for a while, and then you see how you're doing, then you evaluate, you adjust your plans, and you go do it again. I mean, it's this cycle over and over. And in this case, it's, getting feedback from your stakeholders and trying to identify your gaps and working through that, set a plan in place, measure how well you're doing, assess your strengths, report your data, and go through the cycle again and again. Now, people say, oh, that's like the ISO standards. It's the old plan, do, check, act, and so forth, and it's all designed for continual improvement. And, isn't that what we're after? And I say, well, not exactly. Because with continual improvement, you can go from very, very bad to just very bad. And we have continually improved, and we're getting just a little less worse over all the years. What you really want to do is go up to some level of good performance. And how do you know what that is? Well, you have to do some benchmarking, and you have to understand how did the benchmark leaders get there, what did their approach, what were their challenges, and that will give you some insight of how you can go from bad to good, or how if you're good, you can stay good, or how if you're good, you can get better. So we're looking at quantum leaps in performance to the level of good, not just going from bad to very, very bad, or very, very bad to bad. So how do some organizations do this? Well, this kind of gets back to the sustainability operating system. I'll kind of give you some examples of organizations that are doing it well. You've got to have a designated leader. Unbelievably, a big surge in sustainability vice presidents in major corporations these days, just like a rocket. They have slightly different roles. I'm doing a study on that right now, how they're structuring things and moving forward. But you see that for sure. City of Tucson has their own. These universities have people designated as a focal point for sustainability. Help information exchange. And the other thing that they typically do is they may help organize or facilitate the bringing together of the next piece, which are teams. Most of the big companies that are taking sustainability seriously are creating multifunctional teams, multidisciplinary teams, because as we see, sustainability is not about one function. It's not just about the environment. It's about a lot of different things, and every part of the organization has a role to play So you have to bring teams together to see, okay, how can we do this? How should we prioritize? What should be our overarching organizational objectives, the top level ones that we're trying to achieve to move this forward? How do we balance environmental, social, economic issues? Those multifunctional teams are key to keep the thing going, to keep it alive. And the other thing that these teams do is they contribute to the strategic planning that the top executives set for the company, or in the case of university, providing input. Here's the things that we think are important. This is how we're going to make sure it's going to be economically viable. It's going to do these positive things. And this is what we should do on the social, environmental, and economic front. So multidisciplinary teams, you see examples of companies, examples of communities that are doing this, examples of a couple of universities, schools that are doing it, small one, or large one, small one. A lot of others are starting to take it up. Policy. You know, it's amazing. A lot of organizations start out, we're going to do sustainability. Let's all go. Let's get going. And then everybody kind of gets all excited, and then they go off in all these different directions. Because nobody's bothered to say, wait a minute, exactly what is it that we're trying to do here? What is it that sustainability means? That's why we had that policy that I talked about. This is we're trying to translate this into what it is we're really trying to achieve in our organization. So you've got to start someplace with this foundation of what it is we're trying to achieve. There's lots of different things for companies. You've got the Global Compact. You've got the model policy I just talked about. Even the lawyers have got one. Cities have got some. Here's some that for the universities. In my book, I have a whole list of model sustainability policies that different groups of universities, not just individual universities, but groups, 300, 400, 500 universities get together and say, we're signing off on that. My own personal view is it's nice to endorse a code to proclaim to the world your support of it. But in terms of actual operation, you really need one that you develop yourself and that you own. One that talks about the triple bottom line, economic, social, environmental challenges, like the policy we're talking about. One that addresses each of your different sectors, addresses, the operations, the research, the faculty, the students, the outreach, the operation, administration and the like. Everybody kind of understands what their obligations are. And that sets the whole framework for driving sustainability for the years and decades to come. So this is critical, to have this piece together. And in getting this piece, you really need to gain consensus from around the university, from the students, from the faculty, from the administration. Yeah, this is what we believe in. This is what we think we can do. This is what we think we should do. Because it helps people understand the concept. It helps them to understand how it applies to their organization, their own department. And it helps them understand where everybody's going, the fact that they're part of a team contributing to the bigger objective, bigger goal. And it then helps the organization to articulate progress. Here's how we as an organization, here's how we as a university are moving towards sustainability. Here are the things that we're doing, and we're doing this in a transparent way. Here's where we've achieved great accomplishments. Here's where we've got some gaps. Here's our plan to try to address those and be open about it. So this is an important piece. And need to spend some time with your organization identifying exactly what that means to you before you start off and say, we're doing it all. Now, mind you, there's lots of things that are already being done around sustainability. And so part of this will be connecting the dots of excellence that you already have. And that's an important part of this as well. But in the process, you'll be identifying gaps. I've worked with some clients where I actually took the policy, that model policy I showed you. I went around to different people, some managers, some vice presidents and others. I said, tell me, what do you think this means in your own department? Where do you think the organization is strong? And tell me some examples of that. And where do you think the organization is coming up short? And let's talk about that. And so in the process of having these discussions, number one, they learn about what sustainability means. They learn about what it means in their own operations and functions. And they help us identify for the whole organization where our strengths are and where our gaps are, which then helps us put together plans with good support once you start seeing the general feel of the organization, good support for driving forward. So there's different ways of getting at that, but this is a key step. Strategic planning. HB, Baxter, they build this stuff into the strategic planning. You've got this model that's done with communities, and of course these universities are examples of universities that are driving their strategic planning with the framework of sustainability. So that's if you want to really be on the cutting edge of this and you want it to be sustained, you want sustainability to be sustained, you have to have these two pieces. And I talked about this. This is the, if you set this policy in place, not only do you want to talk about the triple bottom line, and not only do you want to talk about the obligation to set goals, measure progress, report publicly. Those are critical things that should be in that policy, because if you don't have that, you don't drive your organization as aggressively as it can be driven, and you don't get the benefit, public relations benefit, which you would gain in terms of attracting better students, attracting better faculty, attracting better donors, unless you're able to articulate that sort of thing. So you really need to have a policy that covers the triple bottom line, but also addresses each one of these components. So each one of these guys understands what to do. And in fact, some teams, some of the multifunctional teams actually draw from each of these sectors for their steering committee. And then they have individual teams working on each one of these. A lot of you'll see from a book, there's other ways of organizing it too. You kind of look at your priorities. But these particular sectors need to be covered if you really want to do an organization-wide, university-wide sustainability approach. The other key thing about this is these are not silos. The real challenge is how can you have these individual elements, individual sectors working together? Can you have a curriculum designed for student activities where they work on projects with the operations? Can you have an outreach program that invites student activities on some research? So the key is how can we cross-link these? Because in the real world of sustainability, those issues are not silo issues. Those are multidisciplinary issues. Those are multifunctional issues. And the key thing we need from students, the key thing we need from institutions is to create the citizens of the future who are used to solving those problems in the context that they need to use to solve them. These are not silo problems. So we want them stepping out with a good understanding of the value of teamwork, the value of working together with different disciplines to come up with some solution that's stronger than any one function could produce. So that becomes the challenge of your approach, is looking at all these sectors and making sure you're touching on these. You see some universities that do sustainability, they're really good at operations, or maybe they're good at research, they have a center, or maybe they've got a strong student group. But if you really want to be in the top level on sustainability, you want to be a leader in this for the university, you've got to be mindful of each one of these segments and making sure these guys are involved in the planning and leadership. It's not just that the body of this chicken is going to flop around and you got the head someplace else. You got to have the head and the body working together to make this work. You say, well, Bill, how do we do all this? Where can I get some tools and ideas? Well, here's 21 different groups. These are groups that are designed specifically to help universities deal with sustainability. They're examples, they're models, they're cases, they're speakers, they're literature. There's a wealth of resources out there if you really want to do this. So you got a question, you have a particular issue, you can go through this list and say, oh, okay, I want to talk to these guys, or do their website, or send an email to them. And you can get a lot of good information, ideas, and exchange your own ideas. You're doing some leading edge things too. I mean, be part of that network. I talked about reporting, how important it is. There's some models of being transparent. You see Ford, Timberland, great example there. They're now putting their labels, sustainability labels on each of their shoe boxes, showing their environmental, social impacts of this particular shoe, so that they're really kind of being out there. But this is an opportunity, I think, for universities to step out and distinguish themselves. No organization starts off wanting to be transparent. They kind of learn it the hard way that they need to be transparent, and they then learn that it's actually beneficial to be transparent because it helps build the credibility and it helps create change within your own organization as part of that plan, do, check, act cycle. So these guys are transparent. You've got some that are integrating it right into their financial reports. This can be done with the university as well. Why have separate reports? Sustainability is part financial, isn't it? Part economic. Universities providing a report on their progress, how well their funding is doing. Why not include social and environmental issues? Simple reports, doesn't need to be complicated. I'd suggest you start off in a simple way. There's great examples of just a couple of pages, the key things on key metrics. Don't try to, do a gazillion page, highly polished, expensive report at first. Make sure you're getting the substance of it. Make sure you're using this data to drive performance. It's really the important thing is internal driver. The kicker is that if you share this information outside, you build your credibility and you build your reputation. But the internal value of it is most important. It's more important than the external one. And actually, this is kind of an interesting one because here you have Polaroid. Polaroid is what Polaroid does? You know what they used to do anyhow? Photograph. They made, instant, pictures and all that. What happened to their business? It went down. It crashed and burned because what happened? Got all these digital cameras. So, anybody know what Polaroid's doing now? Yeah, the guy bought the company. He's using the brand, and he's going to attach it to different electronic equipment that's being built by other suppliers. So he's using the brand. So this company, this is the one I'm very interested in following because this company produced a sustainability report, and they continue to do it as they went down, and they continue to do it with the new owner. Why do you think they would do that? Most people think, wait, we're running out of resources. Why would we do this? Why do you think they did it? Credibility. What else? What's the real value of that company now? The brand. They're trying to keep their brand strong. And they see this as a critical part of their brand. So even though it was a very simple report, they were most concerned about keeping that brand strong. And by the way, as they were kind of going through this transition, they wanted to share with their employees and others, what the challenges were and how they were trying to deal with them in a responsible way. Because they wanted to come across as a responsible organization, notwithstanding the fact that they're going through this huge industry transition, and the fact that their brand needed to be bolstered.
So externally, public reporting is important because it builds credibility.
Right.
Helps you with your reputation. And you made a point about its internal value as well. And
the internal value is, remember we talked about this circle, the Plan, Do, Check, Act. You set goals for yourself, you measure how well you're doing, then you report progress. Now, you can report that internally, and that's one thing. You need to report that internally so everybody in the organization knows how well they're doing. Did we meet our targets? Are we behind? Do we need to do something different? Do we need to celebrate our successes? But the other thing that it does when you start reporting publicly is it lets everybody in the organization know that we're serious about this. Now, we are so serious that we're not just going to report our progress and transparently report it internally, but we're going to report it publicly. We're going to share with all of our stakeholders how well we're doing. And if we make great success, all of our stakeholders are going to know about it. And they're going to know about you, and they're going to know about your department and how well you did and the great thing you accomplished. And if we come up short, well, they're going to know about that too. So it raises the stakes for everybody. It doesn't make everybody comfortable, but what it does is it shows that you're really being accountable for it as an institution, and you're really willing to put your whole self into this effort. You're willing to take it seriously. It's the difference between whether you take it seriously or you're not. If you're out there in the public eye, it's all out there to be seen. And so it really raises the motivation, and it raises the excitement, and it raises the payback when you do well. Because people know they're reporting publicly, and here's the great thing they've done, and we know they're out there and they're going to tell us if they come up short, but here they hit a home run. Terrific. So it's a really important thing, and it's one thing. We've got some universities that are doing it. I don't think anybody is doing it really, really well. And so there's an opportunity for you to step in and be the leader in that. But it's one of the difficult things for universities to do because they don't quite understand the strategic value of it, internally or externally. And they haven't learned how to use that tool to their advantage. And sometimes they think, to do it I have to spend $1 gazillion. And they don't. Local governments are doing the same. You've got some reporting going on. Think about the city. What do you like if you're a citizen? What do you want? I want a good, prosperous community. I want one that has good social programs. I want a clean environment, safe environment for my kids, and so forth and so on. Good education, all that. Perfect framework for planning around sustainability. You've got some in the green purchasing side. The University of Rutgers is a great model there. EPA is doing some great things. Green buildings, you got the city of Chicago. Pollution prevention, you got these companies making $1 billion on that. Water, got these companies. We talked about energy conservation. University of Michigan is pretty good there. Diversity. Companies are doing well. A lot of these companies have been beat up over diversity in the past. And they got the religion. And now they've done some great things. They thought it was impossible to be more diverse. What do you know? They really work at it and apply themselves. Miracles happen. Now they're leaders in this area. Why? Because they applied themselves. Because they said, oh, maybe we can do something. Cities working on this. And here are 3 universities that are keyed up to do something on this as well. So it's not just the province of companies. Here's one of my favorites. This is what we're really talking about when it comes to sustainability. It's really the essence of it. University government business partnerships. We see these issues are not issues that just the university is going to solve or business is going to solve. It needs a lot of different sectors to work on them. So having a university becomes the center of bringing folks together to work on these issues is really a sign of leadership. Ithaca College has done that. They have brought together the county. They've got a part of the community that's focused on their green village, and they're working on creating student service learning opportunities with these different groups working together. And more than that, they put together a conference where they brought together faculty, students, administration, government, business, NGOs, and they sat down and they said, what are our key issues and what can we do something about? What can we really make progress on? And they actually identified projects. They got some on transportation, which we talked about earlier in one of the earlier meetings I had today, alternative fuels, education, outreach. So they're working in a collective way to address those issues. And this is the new model. This is the model for the sustainable university. Bringing in those sectors, trying to solve problems. Problem solvers. Creating people who are problem solvers. The new students of tomorrow. And I think when you look at this whole area, I think back to, this Professor John Shar. He's a retired professor emeritus at the University of California. And the thing he said, and it really certainly applies to sustainability today, this future is not some place that we're going to. It's not like we have a fate and that's it. We actually can shape that. We are the one we're creating. The paths are not to be found but made, and the activity of making them, the process itself, will change us, change both the maker and the destination. So this is not something hopeless. This is something as an opportunity for change for those who want to step forward and take on the role of trying to move this objective forward, a very important objective for society and for the university. Is all there to be done. It's all there just waiting for you to step forward with your friends. And you know what? After a while, it's a small course. It gets to be a bigger course. And then great things happen. Thanks a lot.
We'll take a couple questions. I guess I had a question. What are the trade-offs as made in balancing, say, their own internal operations with sort of the external considerations, social aspects of sustainability?
Yeah. The question is, what are the balances, the trade-offs that the companies have to make as they look at internal issues like financial targets and some of these social and environmental issues? The key thing in running a successful organization is balance. So, for example, if you want to make all the short-term profits you can, you would raise your prices as high as possible. You would squeeze your suppliers as much as possible. You would do all kinds of things that are going to undo you in another year or two. But for today, it's going to make you a lot of money. So if you really want to be short-term, you go in an unbalanced way. But the organizations are not like that. If that's what they were going to do, they'd stop spending on R&D. You would have no R&D spending, because what is R&D spending? R&D spending is long-term spending. It's for the future of the company. And so they can't spend all your money on R&D. You've got to give some to the stakeholders and investors because they expect some return. So it's all a matter of balancing, and it's a matter of balancing among the stakeholders. We've got to give some to deal with the environment because, that's important. We've got to do something for our investors. That's important. We've got to do something for our employees. That's important. So you really have the challenge as a manager to deal with all of those. And people said to me, Bill, but isn't the all-important thing the financial bottom line? Isn't that the most important thing? And I said, well, think about it this way. What's most important to life? Is it air? Is it water? Or is it food? Now, you don't have air, you're dead pretty quick. Well, you have air, you're able to live a little longer. But if you don't have water, after a few days, you're probably going to be pretty dead too. And you can get by with water and air for a long time, but after a couple months and you have no food, where are you?
Dead too.
You're dead too. And the same thing happens to do with the triple bottom line. You don't have money, you're dead as an organization. you don't respect, the environmental issues, it'll take you a little longer, but you're going to be dead anyway as an organization because something's going to happen. You're going to liabilities, some big problem. Your product is all messed up. It's contaminating this, killing people, whatever. And if you don't have social responsibility, it'll catch up with you sooner or later. Maybe it'll eat away at you a little bit at a time, like that 8% at Walmart. You take a bite, but it's going to get to that other piece. So sooner or later, those three things are important. They don't all have the same timing, just like air, water, and food don't, but they're important and they're critical. And that's the way I kind of look at this whole triple bottom line.